what we have here is median, mode, and mean. These are the way we calculate it. I'm showing that for didactic purposes. And we have a median of 1, a mode of 0, and a mean of 2.6. This is an example from the chapter. So a hint for you, anytime you have an example to do, is what was the technique that was in the chapter? So if you go to the exercise, the strong hint would be you're going to use mean, median, and mode here. Is that okay so far? Okay, so let's come back. In this example, it's the town of Sparksville, and this is arsons over a 5-year period. If we come to the exercise, here are arsons over a 5-year period. But do you see the name of Sparksville? No, you don't, because it's not there. So, since the first homework exercise is really just to get familiar with doing things, if you don't see it, you don't want to turn this in because you can't be talking about Sparksville and it doesn't exist. So you'll have Sparksville. But what this doesn't have, it doesn't have a title. So this will be and then you fill in whatever it is. I have dyslexia, so that's better typing than I usually get. But you need a title. So this is not necessary, but if you want, if I go across these three, then I can select, if you look at the top where my cursor is pointing, merge and center. Can you see that? Asia, did you see that? Thank you.
So I'm trying to maximize.
Right above column E, it says merge and center.
In the ribbon.
Yeah, and the ribbon. Do you see the ribbon?
I do not. I see alignment, numbers, style, cells, editing. It might be something I might have to add in.
Are you under home?
I am.
Well, these are the alignment pieces. If you look a little to the right on yours, perhaps, it should say merge and center. So it's not a programming step you have to do. If I do that, what you'll see is over those three, the title that I've entered now will be spread out. And what I can also do is I can go here, and well, I like yellow, and so that's my title. Professionally, I wouldn't do it that way unless I was trying to point out something that was an error. Is this okay? Jatarius, what are you saying?
Sure, I have a question for you. So, not seeing Sparksville, did you just arbitrarily go in and add that, or I know the numbers, the information in the cells matches with the exercise. However, how would we know to go in and
Sure.
change or add that name?
Sure. So anytime I'm working with you on assignments, I'm always thinking about you in the workplace. So in the workplace, you're going to have a context. And here in the assignment, it says, for comparison, the analyst for Sparksville decides to look at 3 other nearby towns. So that tells me that's Sparksville. Also, if I come back to chapter 2 example, it said, this is Sparksville. Is that okay, Jatarius?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for asking questions. That's really important. Our goal here is for this to be a positive learning experience. And by positive, I mean sticky, so that it's useful stuff that'll stay with you. Because as much as you're going to be producing things, you're also going to have people who will be producing things for you. And you'll need to be able to say, here's how you want to do this and offer constructive feedback. So if you're going to compare these, and you know that what we're using is the mean, median, and mode, what do you think you might do?
Do you want us to create visualizations of the data, or are you looking for
Well,
something different?
I'm just looking for what flows naturally as the next thing for a chapter that shows you how to calculate the mean, median, and mode, and then asks you to compare these four cities. And your question, Christian, actually is about 2 or 3 steps ahead, because in 2 more classes, I'll want to focus a bit more on visualization. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the text talks about dispersion, so I didn't know if we were going to get the descriptive statistics, or do we just want to stick with central tendency?
Okay, let's say we're just sticking with mean, median, and mode. How might we do something useful so that you can make a decision about which you can have a data-informed conclusion? And I'm not trying to be tricky here at all.
No, I just like didn't want to be wrong, because I was thinking, well, you'd have to assess the question to see what's the best measure of central tendency to use.
Right. You know, some of the things I have learned the most durably have come when I was wrong. I worked for almost 10 months full time on my doctoral dissertation, and then I had to euthanize it. I had to kill it and start over. That was painful, but I had made some fatal flaws at the beginning. And so if you look at this, how might you, I'm trying to guide you with my thinking as well as here's how we calculate this. How might we use this? We look over here. Got this. Here's how we calculated those. Is that okay? April, looked like you discovered something, or it's too small. So
I'm regularly told that I make a lot of faces when I'm looking at my computer. So I don't want to be distracting. It looks fine, but I was making sure.
take the idea, and we're going to come here.
Oh, you want to compare the data? No?
Yes, you do. It
Okay.
says for comparison. Okay. We want to compare those 4 cities. I'll pretend you didn't have statistics.
Okay.
This is the only tool you know. Using the only tool you know, how can you compare these 4 and make some conclusions?
Calculate each of their mean, median, and modes,
Bingo. Okay.
or measures of central tendency.
Yep.
Make it more
Let's do it.
professional.
Equals, well, here it's average. And I'm down. And then keep in mind, we have to close the parentheses, and this is here. And keep in mind, we have to close the parentheses. And we have to close the parentheses. Okay, so if you wanted, you could select that and add a decimal place so that it's all aligned. That's more an aesthetic. But if you're dealing with certain precision, you wouldn't want to do that, because that says that those are significant numbers, and they aren't. So I'm going to get rid of them, but I'll show you how you could do that. Is this okay so far? Okay. Eric, is that working for you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm feeding my child right now, so
That's okay.
he was in the middle of a tantrum, so I'm still focused on class. I'm just trying to feed him.
No, no, no. I've been there. The full month I was the sitter for my very young daughter. I thought I'd got so much done on my dissertation, I didn't write one sentence. So great respect. Travis, what do you think about this so far? What do you think the next step would be?
To perform the same formulas on each of the other columns.
Correct. So let's take a look at these, Travis. If you look in the formula bar, these are relative, not absolute addresses. They don't have dollar signs, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So they can be,
Same thing for each one. So
you can pull them across.
as a group.
Yeah.
So I'll grab the lower right corner. There it is. I like to center things because it just seems easier to read. Well, how about that? So now, coming back to some of our conversation, you have 4 cities, you have 3 measures, and how would you want to discuss this? And I know that a couple of students have already submitted this assignment, and there are some discussions you can have about observed trends in addition to what you might say for the best measure of central tendency. For example, is a mean a good measure if in Sparksville you had one bad year in 2018 and in Martinet you had one really bad year in 2017? I don't know the answer to that, but it is a question. And it is, if I chose to use that, something I would say, also, please note, there are some outlier values that are exerting extreme pull on this mean.
Dr. Laus.
Yes, sir.
So what is your recommendation on that then? Because I think, because this is only a 5-year spread, and usually
Right.
when you have like a huge outlier like that, you have skewed data. Median is usually the best measure of central tendency. So what would
Right.
you say is like the threshold for, okay, there might be a couple outliers and they might be very strong, but we have a lot of data and we get a very consistent median and mean, like they reflect a very similar number. Which would you say is maybe the threshold there then?
Well, it's not so much that there's a formula for that. Although if you remember from your statistics, if you look for a Gaussian and normal curve, when you have something that's too skewed from that, it strongly suggests the median is a better way to go. And it could be that I would choose median, but with Sparksville and with Martinet, I would have in the pros and maybe documented here in a cell what was extraordinary that year. There might have been something. If you think of the brush fires that occur in Canada or in the Southwest, or there might be some reason why. So you don't want to ignore outliers. You want to do a postmortem on it. Why is an outlier? Because often that brings a lot of information to you. And if you're only doing the statistics, well, I've heard people say, well, let's exclude the outlier and it'll look more like a bell-shaped curve. And I'm thinking, yeah, but that's not the data. So let's not exclude the outlier. So include it. Give the most important part for this course is with things like this is to have a reason. So whenever you're asked or you're challenged, you've got a reason for why you chose something. And this could be a reason. It's highly skewed data. It's a short run. It's 5 years. But it could be there was also population growth. There could be a lot of things that we don't know. Is this okay so far? I'm counting to 7. So if you notice at the top, Asia, on mine, I'm at the top of the ribbon, I'm at insert. Okay? So I'm coming down to make a cell active, and the cell I'm making active is B13. You can tell it's the one that's being made active because in the name box up here where my cursor is moving back and forth, it says B13, plus you've got a border that's darker around that. Okay, so I want to insert something. Insert. Now I'm going to move my cursor slowly so you can see where I'm going. I'll go past maps and pivot chart to spark lines. Anyone who has used spark lines, please let me know. I'm curious as to how. Okay, so this is also line. So select a range for the spark lines. Well, the range is going to be the range of our data. Okay? Spark lines are also called data words. You'll see why. To your point, Christian, about visualization, we now can visualize those 5 years. And it's easy to see. There's a peak, and other than that peak, they're all about the same. It wouldn't be, which one do I use? Which ones are available to me that I would add to what I'm discussing? Is that okay? You can do something really, a couple of things really nicely with this. So if I take that, I can copy that, and in a Word document, I could be talking about, and there was this trend where there was a peak in 2018, and I would put in parentheses, and I would just drop that in there. It would be like a word. And then I keep going. So that's in your Word document. So it starts to connect what's in the Excel with what you're saying. Now, if that were over a 50-year period, it would still fit in that same cell. And you would see peaks and troughs. Everybody good?
I have a question.
Sure.
In terms of the data, let's say you're getting the data from an outside source. When you're
Yeah.
putting it through the Word doc, do you still have to cite it from the source you got it from, or does that not matter as long as you're explaining how the data was there?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think I had shared with you most of my career has been in healthcare and management and access to medicines, things like that. It's it is among the most important facts that you can ascertain. Where did this data come from? How do I know it's not biased? And you want to document all of that. When you get it, you should have certain metrics that when you receive it, it's called a data handshake. It says you should have this many observations, you should have this many variables, and the following have some missing values. And it just tells you what this is so that you can look at it and know that what they told you you were receiving is what you actually received. Is that okay, Eric?
Yeah, I was just really curious because I know sometimes when I've looked through articles or peer-reviewed articles in the past, kind of understanding their data, sometimes it's really difficult to kind of get a gist of like where it's coming from. Even though they explain it, they don't really give an insight on, completely everything that came from, I guess, from data from another source or whatever. So I was just really curious. That's all.
Okay. Well, I was an editor for 9 years, section editor at an international peer-reviewed journal. And what I would suggest, anytime you read something like that, write the author and ask. And as somebody who's published a bunch too, I'd be delighted to explain it. Sometimes they'll have a separate access to what their data are. If they don't, they can certainly support it. Okay. Now,
And Professor Lau, sorry to backtrack because I finally was able to merge and center the arsons compared to, and I think the main part, and I know this is recorded, but the main part I missed was the averages, or basically calculating the mean, median, mode for the rest of the columns.
Okay, let's do it again. I'll come up here, I'll say clear all. We didn't do it yet. So let's back up here. If you look at the formula bar, Asia, you see that those are relative cell references, not absolute, because some of the things we were looking at so far are absolute. So if I click and highlight, make active those three measures, and then the bottom right, I click and drag, since they're relative cell references, you'll see that in column E, the mean is the average of E8 to E12. In column D, the average is D8 to D12, C8 to C12, etc. We can do that because they're relative cell references. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So what do you think we might be able to do with this spark line? Let's see. There you go. Any thoughts on this?
I do have a quick question. I wasn't able to catch how you were able to get the spark lines. Could you?
Okay, let's do it again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it's not going to be a race. I want to make sure that it's clear. So if I'm not, thank you very much for asking the question in real time. I want to, and you could label this spark line if you want, but I don't know that that's necessary. So I'll be in cell B13. You see that okay, Cody?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And I say equals. Well, I'm going to the top of the ribbon where it says insert. And when I make that active, here, insert. And when I make that active, it opens up all of these options. And when I come across just beyond the middle, that's where spark lines are. And you have different types of spark lines you can use. You can use columns, win-loss, if it's another kind of measure. And you might want to experiment with these. But let's say we want to stay with lines. So it's going to ask me, where is the data range from which this spark line, this data word, is going to be created? So I'll close the box. So it's just focus on that. I will click and drag across the range. Notice that we do not have to make a right parenthesis for this. I'll open the box up, and it says it's going to be in B13. Okay with me, so it did it. Is that okay, Cody?
Yes, thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. So what I'll do now is I'll make that active, then I'll grab the box at the lower right corner and drag it across. Any thoughts on what we have now? Do you think this adds to the understanding of the observed arsons?
Yes.
Okay. If it were you, and if we had a more complete title, and if we had some footnote or something that contained information about Sparksville in 2018 and Martinet in 2017, do you think this is something you might be able to grab as a slide in a presentation that you're making? The reason I ask that is over time, if you want to use these tools, you'll need to own them in the way that when you show something, people will, I have found, inevitably see something that I haven't, and they'll ask some question about it. So you'll have some discussion. And the raw data is the raw data. If you have extenuating information, like why is one different than the other, the outliers, and can explain it. You would explain that. But then you would have in your prose, in your report, what is the comparative measure of central tendency that I would find most useful? And it might be that you would say, this is most useful 3 out of 4, but in this fourth one, it really doesn't for whatever the reason is. And then I might discuss these data words, the spark lines. And what's nice about that is when you're writing a report, if you're talking about a peak of data or suddenly there's a trough, you know, like there might be a sell-off in the stock market, so you see it going along and then suddenly there's a dip. Well, copy that in parentheses, paste it, and it looks just like another word that's in parentheses, but now the person receiving what you've written can visualize what that is. Is that okay? Is that okay? I mean, are there any questions?
The only question I would have, and I think that I'm self-answering it, but the spark lines are independent of each other. So, for example, Rayson is a good one. It has the spike towards the middle, but it is nowhere near what the spike in Sparksville is of 10, but visually, how it's presented here, it could be misinterpreted to say that it had the same amount of arsons just later in time. I think that that's something that you would want to ensure that you clarify or explain in the dialogue of it or description of it.
That's right, because you think about the expel work you're doing and the written document, they're like that. They complement and are connected to each other. So yes, that's exactly right. Okay.
But for the purposes of comparison, what this does show is it's not a spree that's at the same time across all 4 of these cities.
Correct. You know, one of the things I would look for, again, this is just looking at data. I know 0 about arson or criminal justice, but I would wonder, well, the highest was in Martinet, and then the next year the highest was in Sparksville. I wonder if there's an arsonist who's moving around there. I don't know. You'd see if there were, and that person was apprehended, well, that could be part of the explanation of your data. I'm just making stuff up right now. Any answer should generate more questions with data. Although sometimes you do get an answer and you can make a decision. What's missing if we think about good spreadsheet practices? So what we've done now is to lay out clearly. We could have, I don't think it's necessary, you could have had blank rows above and below the spark lines. We did add a title. Where it says exercise, if this is homework problem, you would have homework problem, whatever it is, like 2.6 or whatever it is on the number for homework number 1. And then if you had another sheet, because something said start with a blank sheet, then you would name this whatever the homework problem is, where you start with a blank sheet and you replicate something. Is this clear?
Professor, can you explain that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. Let me delete this. So let's look at the homework. Homework. Where's homework? Assignments. Homework 1. So here, QN1, start with a fresh Excel sheet and replicate chapter 2 example. So I add the plus sign, so I'm starting with a blank, fresh Excel sheet. I will right-click and rename Now, what I could do that would make that more informative is I would say homework 1, QN1. And then if we go back to the homework, there's some more with this exercise sheet. So if you're going to do the comparisons, here's the exercise sheet. So I could say rename. I could have left it as exercise and then call it homework 1, QN2. There. And since 2 comes after 1, I'll move this over here. And now I have my 2 homeworks. And I think that might be all for the first homework that you have to have Excel. I don't remember. Did that help?
Yes,
Eric?
thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have kind of a follow-on question. Is there a and I guess this would be probably the book more than anything, or maybe I don't. Sorry, I'm blabbering. The terminology QN.
Oh, yeah.
Does the N stand for something or represent anything? I'm assuming it just means it's Excel work or exercise related.
Yeah, that's my note to myself. I probably should just go back next time I teach this and just call it question 3 and question 4 or something like that. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. So what's missing? Think about good spreadsheet practices. What do I not have on either one of these? There. So I want to basically put fingerprints on it. I'll highlight this. I want to have my name, course, the homework assignment, and the date. Sometimes folks can get a little off schedule and they'll post a homework to the wrong assignment place in Canvas. But if I look at this and it says, oh, it's this, and then I know I just need to move it over to where it belongs. More importantly, when you're in a work setting, you'll want to always identify who you are, what it's for. Instead of here homework, it might be the version, what date is it, and depending on the genesis of it, you might say if it's under a contract, what's the reference number for the contract? And down here, if you can see at the bottom, I'm going to put plus, and I'll say rename appendix, and I'm not going to add something there. It's just to separate that from what came before. And here I'll right click, rename, communication protocol. And there I would have information. How frequently are we communicating? Who is part of this team or project that will be engaged with it? What is it that we exchange each time, et cetera, et cetera. If you take these first 3 sheets away, what you see is there's a work product, an appendix, communication protocol. So you're building out something that's self-contained. Is this okay? Important focus for today, 2 things. 1 is good spreadsheet practices, and 2, when you've learned a tool, mean, median, and mode, how am I going to use it? And here's a way you can use it.